All right, let's jump right in. I want you to literally picture this in your mind's eye. Imagine a cinematic, glowing 4K scene of infinite sacred architecture. We're talking endless, concentric spiritual worlds. Each massive, glowing sphere doesn't just sit there. It contains 10 inner spheres. And then each of those inner spheres opens up into 10 more, endlessly subdividing into infinite dimensions of light. It's breathtaking. This is the ancient, mystical architecture of the cosmos, right out of the Talmud Eser Sefirot, specifically Volume 2. Today, we're going to explore this exact structure. We'll be looking at it through the lens of a cosmic architect mapping out the universe, and also kind of through the eyes of a gamer navigating an infinitely complex system.
So right off the bat, you gotta wonder, if there are infinite dimensions and infinite layers of spiritual worlds, where exactly does the light go? I mean, how does spiritual light move through these endless dimensions without totally depleting its source? How does that energy travel from the absolute highest, most infinite point all the way down to the lowest, without losing its power or leaving some kind of empty void behind? Well, to answer that, we have to start with the pshat, the literal fundamental structure described in the text. The architecture really begins with two main concepts. First, we have the Igulim, which literally translates to circles. Think of infinite layers of concentric spiritual worlds. Those are your Igulim. But then they are penetrated and intricately connected by this single perfectly straight pipeline of infinite divine light. That pipeline is called the kav, or the line. Basically, everything in existence receives its life force routed downward through this single, highly specific divine line.
Section 1. Circles and the line.
So let's break down how this actually builds. We need to look at the exact cosmic geometry of these Sefirot, these spiritual spheres. And this brings us to a concept that is absolutely crucial to grasp: Hitkalelut, or inter-inclusion. The source text is super explicit here. It tells us that every single world and every single sphera consists of 10 specific inner spherotes. And then guess what? Each of those consists of 10 more. It's a fractal. It endlessly subdivides into infinite microscopic details. Nothing in this system is just a single flat layer. Everything is an infinitely deep, complex system of 10 within 10.
And what's really amazing is how this setup creates strict boundaries. The Ein Sof, the infinite itself, surrounds these circles, but it actually doesn't touch them directly. If it did, everything would just instantly merge back into infinity. The structure would collapse. So instead, the circles are arranged like nested layers. That single line, the kav, acts as a highly regulated conduit. The light flows strictly downward through the kav, piercing each circle one by one. This allows each layer to receive exactly what it needs, and then it passes the remaining influence downward. It maintains perfect, pristine boundaries.
Section 2. No absence in spirit, or Ein Heder Baruchani.
So here we run into a massive paradox. Think about it. If light moves down from a higher level to a lower level, does the higher level lose it? Does it suddenly become dark? This brings us to a fundamental law of spiritual physics, and honestly, this is probably one of the most important rules you need to grasp in this entire study. Ein Heder Baruchani. There is no absence, no loss, and no lack in the spiritual realm, ever. And I've got to give you a strong warning right here. Do not, under any circumstances, imagine physical movement or literal spatial layers when we talk about this. Spiritual movement is not like picking up a physical object from a box and moving it over to another box. It just doesn't work that way. Let's compare the two, so we can completely shatter our physical understanding of this. When you have physical movement from point A to point B, point A is now empty. The object relocated. It's gone. But spiritual movement, completely different. Moving from point A to point B is what the texts call a renewal of form. It leaves an eternal imprint, known as a Reshimo, in point A. The source gives us this absolutely perfect analogy. It's like lighting a candle from another candle. Think about it. That first flame is never ever diminished by giving its light to the second one. The light just expands.
Section 3. The Cosmic Server Analogy.
To make these ancient esoteric mechanics totally clear for our modern minds, let's drop into the sod, the secret inner layer, and translate it into an analogy of cosmic engineering. Think of the Sefirot as this incredibly nested network architecture, like a massive cosmic server. The Sefirot are the nodes. They are literal data centers of spiritual energy. The divine light, the shefa, is the signal. Now, when that signal routes downward to a lower node, it uses what we'd call non-destructive routing. The data doesn't just vanish from the higher server. Instead, it leaves what the text calls a Reshimo, a permanent preserved data cache. Literally every signal ever routed through a node leaves a permanent non-destructive cached imprint behind. It's brilliant.
Section 4, the video game analogy.
For a slightly different spin, let's translate this into an analogy that perfectly explains Hitkalelut, this idea of layers within layers, by thinking like a gamer. Imagine the universe runs on this infinite game engine. Every massive level you enter contains 10 hidden mini-levels. And if you go into one of those mini-levels, it contains 10 micro-levels. But here is the absolute magic of the system. Whenever a spiritual power passes through a level to reach a lower one, it leaves an eternal upgrade mark on the higher level. Because remember, there's no absence in the spiritual. So an ability unlocked or a power routed through a higher zone is permanently recorded right there. The higher level literally gets to keep the upgrade forever.
Section 5. Eternal Imprints of Light. Exhaustive Mechanics.
Okay, now that we have those analogies in our toolkit, let's get into the exhaustive, precise mechanics outlined in the Talmud Eser Sefirot. We're going to look at exactly how this data flows and, importantly, how it's restricted. Because the crucial point here is that this infinite light absolutely needs boundaries, or else the receiving vessels would shatter from the overload. A partzuf is the structured spiritual entity, kind of like the operating system organizing the flow. The Ohr Ein Sof, that's the light and the vessel, essentially your data and your hardware. But to prevent a massive system overload, you have Simsum. This acts as a cosmic firewall. It's a deliberate restriction of that initial overwhelming infinite light so that the lower levels can actually handle the data flow.
Building on that firewall concept, we have the Masach, which translates to a screen or a filter. This is the resistive force that carefully measures and bounds the light based on the vessel's specific capacity. When the light strikes this screen, a process called haka'ah, a zivug occurs. That's a synchronization or coupling. Now here is where it gets incredibly fascinating. The source speaks of Hitkalelut, which means the departure or withdrawing of the light. But because there's no absence in the spiritual realm, when the light departs, it doesn't leave a void. It leaves behind the Reshimo. It leaves an eternal, preserved data cache of itself.
Let me give you a very explicit example directly from the text to show you exactly how Hitkalelut builds this infinite complexity. So, all light originates in the Ein Sof, the infinite. Let's say the light of wisdom, or chakama, needs to reach its specific destination vessel. To get there, it absolutely must pass through the highest sephira first, which is Kater, the crown. Passing through Kater leaves a permanent imprint, a Reshim, right there in the crown. The result? Kater now eternally holds its own light, plus the permanent imprint of Chachma. And this perfectly illustrates a reality so profound, the author of the text spells it out with absolute awe. Quote, "Any light that once shone in a spiritual state never leaves it for eternity, not even the slightest bit." I really want you to let that sink in. Not even the slightest bit. When the light of wisdom passes through the crown to go lower down, it permanently belongs to the crown too. Those lower details, they are literally just preserved imprints of a higher root. And honestly, this is exactly why the number 10 is so central to everything we're talking about. Every single light must pass through every previous stage, leaving a permanent imprint every single time. So you inevitably get 10 within 10. It's an endlessly subdividing, infinite matrix of divine metadata. Ultimately, this entire system is about the preservation of spiritual metadata. Every lower detail reveals an eternal imprint of the higher root. Every time light flows downward, it enriches the levels above it forever. And remember, as students of this text, we strictly rely on the data flow mapped out for us. If a concept isn't explicit in the source, we don't invent it, we don't make it up. We follow the lines, the circles, the firewalls, and the permanent caches of light exactly as the ancient cosmic architects laid them out. So ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, if every action leaves an eternal imprint in the architecture above, what kind of data are we passing up the line today? Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week. If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments. We'll see you in the next chapter.